We are very excited at the Innovation School to be able to welcome and present Taylor Ryan here today. Taylor has been in Copenhagen a few years. He's, how many?
3.
3 years. So, and Taylor is from the United States and Washington, D.C., right? He's already got a pretty amazing career within growth hacking and marketing. And at the moment, Taylor is the CMO of Valuer.
Nailed it.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have about 40 minutes together. So lean back, get some more coffee, make sure you have your croissants, and let's start. Okay? And there will be a few minutes by the end if you have any questions. And that's it. Okay, so let's get started.
Cool.
So I'm going to give it over to you.
Thank you. All right, great. Yeah, why not? All right. Cool. So I've already kind of gotten the introduction. Thank you very much, Bodhi, for having me. I've co-founded 5 startups. I've been in the startup scene for going on 11 plus years. As Bodhi said, I'm the CMO of Valuer. Valuer connects startups with large corporations that are interested in innovation. My goal is to cover a lot of stuff today. That way everybody leaves with something. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. The idea is, as Bodhi said, there's a lot of these coming up. So if you don't get something immediate out of the moment, there will be more detailed stuff certainly later. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've covered the about me. I just kind of want to dive in. So a fun fact about me, I was on a reality show from the States called House Hunters International. It was about me moving to Denmark, and they made me look like a super douche as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to watch that, it's very simple to Google. Just look up House Hunters International on YouTube, and you can find it. So my goal for today is to provide value. I'm trying to hit a lot of different areas. There's a lot to cover, but I guarantee you there's something in here that's for you. And I realize everybody has a different business model, a different service, but I think there's a lot of relevancy across the board. I will make sure that Talent Garden gets the slides, but I'll also be putting them up on my LinkedIn. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I think there's one other guy named Taylor Ryan in all of Denmark. So you have at least an idea of what I look like. One more thing, I love taking questions throughout, just so long as you're not that guy, and we all know what that guy is. It was, like every 2 seconds. I will point you out as that guy if you turn into that guy. But please, every time there's always one. But don't hesitate to ask questions. So this is the interactive portion of the show. I want to know who's here, right? So of the people here, how many of you are students? Just a show of hands. All right, nice. How many of you are currently working within marketing or product marketing? Show of hands. All right, very cool. And how many of you are entrepreneurs? Somebody that's doing their own thing. All right, really good mix. Perfect. Okay. It's always good to kind of get a feel for the room, know the audience. So I'm going to probably get a little more technical on some of this stuff. For those that don't get where I'm going on some of this, you'll learn it later probably, I hope. So cool. Here's the slide that you probably thought you would see, the definition of growth hacking, right? You can read that for yourself later. My definition is basically doing the most that you can with the least amount of money in the shortest amount of time to get the biggest results. That is the goal, right? The whole concept that growth hacking is kind of evolved into is this idea of getting away from the one-to-one approach, right? And if you're trying to build something in the way of a business, you're not calling every single customer in the phone book. It's a mixture of targeting, it's a mixture of better optimized processes and tools and all these different things that can allow you to hit a lot more opportunities a lot more frequently and hopefully get better results. So that's kind of the concept here. So I'm super passionate about this, and it's something that I genuinely believe in. Growth hacking is doing the work, and unfortunately there is no substitution for the experience. So I meet a lot of people that have a theoretical understanding of what growth hacking is versus the experiential or the doing the work side. And one of the metaphors I always use is, imagine you have to take your car to the mechanic and you say, hey, I'd like to get my car fixed. It's on the fritz. And there's two mechanics there. One goes, well, I've read a lot of books and I think I have an idea of what I'm talking about. And the other guy has oil underneath his fingers and he's like, well, I've fixed cars for the last 20 years. I'm choosing the second guy, as most of us would. The other analogy is like a heart surgeon. I think we all kind of get where I'm going with that, right? So the way that I look at marketing is it's all about systems, right? And if you understand one system, you can apply it to all the others. So the idea is, if you get really good at content, all of a sudden you start dabbling in, let's say, amplification because you want to get the word out. Or maybe you understand SEO as a result of that, because you can say, great, if I start changing the skimmability or the titles of these certain areas or the URL structure, all of a sudden my content is getting more views. You can apply everything from learning one area. And I think it's so important as marketers and those that want to get into the world of marketing, is that you can't stay proficient in just one area. You have to expand to others. And it's relatively easy to do that because that's how marketing works. So I always say it's important to be able to use these systems. So prioritization is one of those things, because there's only so many hours in a day, and contrary to as much as I try to get stuff done, there's only 7 days in a week as well, right? So we need to find the most opportune situations that require the least amount of effort in order to get the biggest results. And if most of us, or many of us here, probably are working in smaller companies, that means prioritization is number one. Right? So there's this really cool principle that I've referred to in many places. It's called the Pareto principle. It's the 80-20 rule. The concept is basically 80% of the results go into, 80% of the results come from 20% of the efforts. Think of like, the analogy I always use is 80% of the alcohol is drank by 20% of the population. 80% of the sales comes from 20% of the sales department. 80% of the features are only used by 20% of your users. There's a million different analogies there, but I think this is incredibly important to look at it from the perspective of sometimes traffic or conversions, right? So especially with Valuer, we have one piece that's driven 80% of our traffic and conversions. The idea is doubling down on doing something extremely well might actually be more beneficial than doing a bunch of things very mediocre. And I'll dive into that kind of throughout this, but I think that's an important theme and something to bear in mind, and you can see that throughout traffic as well. One of the things that I constantly battle with and have battled with over the years is why social media, I have probably more colorful language than most people are used to. But yeah, sometimes I don't give a shit about what happens on social media. It's for sometimes oppressing upon some of the powers that be, whether it's founders, CEOs, or the people that are doling out the cash that really care. And I know that there's a lot of numbers and a lot of charts on here, but basically one of my most important KPIs, key performance indicators, is conversions. Conversions lead directly to revenue. That's what I should be measuring. I shouldn't be measuring page views. I shouldn't be measuring impressions, right? All that stuff is relatively important, but what is the most important thing to focus on? What is my priority? And that's to get cash in, right? So it's something that we have to bear in mind. So on the left, you see basically the conversions by channel. Direct and Google are basically organic, right? Are the most important ones. But there's also social media. And if you add up all of my social media combined, it doesn't come close to what I get via direct and organic. There's a million different ways to break this down. I wish I had the time, but I got to move on from this one because I can go down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. So I want to show a couple of quick examples of why content, or at least really good content, matters. So this is Ron Swanson. I forget the television show he's from. I never really caught it. There you go. Parks and Rec. Somebody's got it. I wish I had these people when I was trying to figure out stuff. Never mind. But yeah, the quote is basically never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. Do one thing really, really well. And I'm going to break down why that's important. But before I do, I want everybody to understand that I'm certain that most people have seen a marketing funnel. The funnel is basically throwing enough things at the top so at the very bottom you get something in the way of a conversion or an opportunity to convert something into cash or drive revenue. Right? And there's a million different things that go into content. This can be videos, this can be blog posts, this can be social media stuff. It's anything that's taking the vast majority of people that are somehow related to your world and bringing them closer to what your service is or your product is and trying to get them to put a credit card down or say, yes, I'll attend that event or whatever it is that you're trying to convey. But I think there's so much more power if you actually understand who's doing it well. So show of hands, who's heard of Dollar Shave Club? Yeah? Cool. I'm not going to show the video here because we're kind of strapped for time, but it's in the slides. These guys basically built their entire business off of one viral video. It's basically the guy explaining the service in kind of a cheeky, fun, arrogant, and also hilarious kind of way. And that video ended up getting 25 million hits, which resulted in them getting bought by Gillette for $1 billion. That's billion with a B, right? The company was 3 years old. Holy shit, right? So it's one of those things that I've seen other examples of this. I'm going to bounce out of the slides just to show a real quick version of this. So I used to work over at a company called Plan Day, and whenever I was working at different places and my current place, I'd always go in to see what the competitors were doing, and I'll show you guys how to do that as well. But this was, when I worked, they basically do hourly shift software, almost identical to what the company I worked for, Plan Day, did. And it was a very simple article, but the thing that I found staggering was the amount of views. That number is 3.5 million views for an article that, quite frankly, is very long. It's super long. I think it's like 15, 20,000 words. It's a novel. But the idea is that even on the best possible trajectory for my company, Valuer, if we do everything right for the next 3 years, we're not coming close to 3.5 million views. It ain't happening. So this one piece of content basically built their entire business. That's fucking crazy, right? So there's a million different versions of that, and I'll show one more just to drive the point home. There's a local company, Novo Resume. And I really like the guys over there. I think they're doing a cool job. They had this clever, cutesy idea to basically build the resume for Elon Musk. Obviously, Elon Musk, he doesn't really need to pass out his resume. I have a feeling that he's got enough opportunities kind of knocking down his door. But it was this really kind of simple, cutesy thing, relatively short, not a whole lot of work, maybe a 4 or 5 hour endeavor. They got shared on time.com, which then got them into Forbes, Business Insider, Lifehacker, and all of a sudden they're getting millions of hits a month from one single clever piece of content. So it's crazy when you think about it. So I encourage people to think about content this way, and I have a little note here at the bottom. You know, would you prefer writing 100 articles that get 10 unique visitors a month that are kind of meh, or would you rather have 5 really clever articles that each drive 1,000 visitors a month? The difference is staggering, and so you have to think of content this way, and I think that is incredibly important from a growth hacking perspective. So where do the best ideas come from for this kind of stuff? And I have to use my words very carefully. Because somebody always takes the wrong thing away from this in terms of like, oh, you're stealing. And it's like, no. I'm using the savvy skills of 2019 to get the best possible impression. Okay, I'm fucking stealing. But the reality is, I look at it as inspiration. So there's a few different things that you can take into account. Your competitors, right? And I think that's really easy to do if you know who your competitors are. And by the way, you should, right? You should know who else is in your space and who you need to be competing with. But it's also from different influencers. These are the people that are putting out better and more hot stuff and have a ton of people following them. But it's also like news and industry stuff. And we're all in our own industries. We all have our main industry blogs. But I wanted to show something, and I don't know, I show it all the time, but I still don't think people actually do it. It's called the skyscraper technique. So the concept is, back in the early days of New York City, it was kind of a big deal to have the tallest skyscraper in New York. So the idea was that after you finish building your building, somebody put one up taller. You're like, fuck it. I'm going to put a 30-meter flagpole on top. Now I got the tallest skyscraper again. And a lot of people were doing that. It was crazy. So I encourage you to try to do that on your own. The idea is find your competitor's best piece of content and say, great, I want to make a better version of this, stick your flagpole on top and basically say, okay, instead of having a blog post that is the 10 things I wish I knew before I started a educational startup, it's 15 or 25 things everyone needs to find out before they go into ed tech. All of a sudden, you're not copying, you're not stealing, you're using inspiration to beat somebody who's in your space and a competitor, obviously, at their best possible game. It's like taking their star athlete out of the game before the game's over, right? There's so much power there. So here's how you do it. And everybody has their own tools. I prefer Ahrefs, and those that are dabbling in SEO, I think there's a lot of value there. But let's say I want to do one of my competitors, so for innovation is one of my competitors. I know it's kind of small up there, but there are screenshots, so I'll zoom in a little. So basically, and I'll show this as well towards the end in terms of how to look up competition, but there's this little section down here called Top Content, which allows me to see, based on engagements and referring domains, what my competitor's best piece of content is. So this is more than likely driving their best traffic, gives them the most organic keywords, and probably is propelling their business. So rather than let them beat me in my own niche, it's like, cool, I'm going to try to figure out an article that I can outlap these people with. So one of the articles that they put in here is 4 types of innovation: hunters, builders, explorers, and experimenters. I can do 5 types and call it a day. And the difference is I can make a much longer article, go further in depth, and there's I guaranteed a better version of value that I can give, because that article is probably months, if not years old. And the reality is Google is starting to serve up newer and newer articles and letting the old ones fade away. And that's a big reason, which I'll kind of get into later, why you need to continue to update your content. That's a different story for a different day. But yeah, I think there's so much there, but in the essence of time, I've got to move on from that. So that's the skyscraper technique. The skyscraper technique 2.0 is really exciting, and I think there's stuff that I didn't have the words to explain, but it's from the same guy, Brian Dean from Backlinko, and he basically explains that there's this new thing called intent, right? What is the intention of the user when they're looking for your article? Why are they seeking you out? And I think there's so much there. It's fun to kind of break these things apart, but it's also saying you need to get better with some of your technical side. So back in the early 2000s, there was this whole idea of like keyword density, where if you shoved enough keywords into your article, all of a sudden it would pop up first. It doesn't work that way anymore. If you were trying to rank for, I don't know, coffee mug back in the early 2000s, you could legitimately copy and paste the word coffee mug 1,000 times and you would be #1 on Google. Fucking fantastic, right? Doesn't work that way anymore though. So the idea is there's this thing called latent semantic indexing. Latent semantic indexing, which basically looks like that word cloud. So the idea is, what are the related words or the synonyms for the main area, or main phrase, or main topic that you're trying to rank for? And I think there's a lot there. I would love to go into that in deeper detail, but I really can't. Got to move on. I constantly have this battle of words with a lot of journalists and a lot of other marketers that love content. And the idea is, how long should a post be? Because 10 years ago, it was 700 words tops. Like, you're good. 500 words is fine. It's not the case anymore. So if you look at the graph on the left there, it's basically the average length of content for the top 10 kind of results for the average keyword. And what you're finding is basically articles that are somewhere around this 2,500 mark tend to be the best length. And this is just the current thing. Who knows? In 2 years it could change. But the idea is that The top 1 to 3 pages really are somewhere around this 2,000 plus, 3,000 plus thing. The other side of it is average shares, like in terms of social media, by content length is even longer, 3,000 to 10,000 words. It means you have to really cover a topic in detail. Turn over every stone, find out exactly what it is that you're trying to convey, and go into detail. People are searching to have a meaningful engagement with your content. They want to know what it is that you're trying to inform people about. Otherwise, what the fuck is the point of writing it? It doesn't matter, right? So there's millions of sites now that are putting out these short pieces of content and hoping to rank, but it's all junk. And I think you're going to see that the intention behind searching is not to find junk, but to find a meaningful piece or article that defines in deep detail what it is that you're looking for. I genuinely believe that. Just to drive home the point, I put in a little screenshot from a douchebag I was dealing with last week. Please don't be the non-technical guy that tries to tell somebody else how marketing works. I don't know, I love shaming people, so it seems basically the guy was like, I sent over a 700-word article, either you publish it or scram. And so he says, it seems we have some differing opinions around SEO practices, but instead of debating correct search engine reverse engineering, as neither of us can factually prove our position without dissecting Google IP, whatever that is, I recommend we look at a factual page rank, and he lists his site, Alexa.com is, and so on. Nobody's used Alexa since 2004. And it's like, dude, wait, don't bring a cock popsicle to a gunfight. Like, this is crazy. So it's just one of those things that I really encourage you, if you want to get good at your craft, get into it. Look this stuff up. But don't tell people how to do these other things. And don't tell people short content works, because I promise it doesn't. You can test it on your own today. And I really encourage you to do that, because that's how I've learned. So moving on. Titles are really important. I don't have a ton of time to go into this slide. I do think that there's some really fun stuff out there in terms of title generators, and I list a few of those in this slide. One of my favorite ones is SEO Presser, and basically you just type in your keyword and it shows up with a bunch of articles that are kind of worded in this interesting fashion. So one of the gentlemen that was in the audience before ran a business about t-shirts, and so we threw in t-shirts. And the results, I'm like, holy, this works, right? 5 things nobody told you about t-shirts. I'm like, what do I not know about t-shirts? Like, I got to click on that, you know? So there's so much into this. And the idea is, like, try these things out. See what happens. Magic could somehow come out of this. And there's so many different tools to be able to get there. So in terms of, like, what goes into great content, everything goes into great content. So I use GIFs, even for pieces that are directed to CIOs and CTOs. They're like, you really think a cartoon GIF and a meme is important in talking about valuations for corporate innovation? I'm like, fuck yeah, it is, because they're people and they want to read, and this breaks up the boring content. And I promise you, this stuff works. In terms of time on page, if you include memes, break up the content, people stay. If you see a mile-long article that has nothing and is just a bunch of long paragraphs, people bail out. They don't have the time, they're bored, it's not interesting. So I think there's so much to that, and I would encourage you to test out for yourselves and kind of see what's in there. There's a few other guides in there in terms of some of the more SEO stuff, but I don't know, it's neither here nor there.
Sorry, if
Sure.
it includes me, what about copyright rules?
So memes are interesting, right? So with copyrights, unless you're using it for an ad and you're at least citing something in the way of the source, or you're making an effort to do so, you're fine. It's when you start using it for commercial use and you use it for a sponsored post or a paid ad, that's when you run into hot water. And the reality is, if you receive a cease and desist order, make it as like a, hey, great, somebody's checking out our content. Good stuff. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. Finishing strong is one of those things that happens to all of us in every facet of life. The idea is that we often get to 80 or 90% finished with a product and say, man, I'm tired of this, I want to move on. The magic, the benefits, and the art is in the details. It's finishing the final thoughts. It's making sure to add in the internal and external links. It's putting everything together to its final and complete situation versus just saying good enough. Good enough doesn't get funding. Good enough doesn't get you a paycheck. Good enough doesn't drive the point home. Good enough doesn't get ranked. Be great, right? Be exceptional. Finish strong, and I can't tell you, it's in everything. It's in web development, it's in design, it's in content, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves. So social media hacks. I'm going to try to run through some of this pretty quickly, but I think there's some really interesting stuff that's just happened more recently. So algorithms are constantly changing, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. There's constantly an evolution and a testing happening on the micro scale and on the macro. And I think it's important to be able to test for yourself, but I've read a fair amount of content about this, and I also think there's a lot of really cool little things that you can try to game the system. So there's this push towards meaningful engagement that's happening, and you can read articles, especially on Facebook, about this. They're trying to get rid of fake news. They're trying to get rid of posts that are essentially people liking without reading the article. So if you are liking without clicking the actual article, it's less of a boost to your post. If you are commenting or seeing more comments, that post is actually being boosted up. The whole concept is that they're trying to get you to stay longer. The whole reason they want you to stay longer, the whole reason they're pushing people to have these actions is in the hopes that they can serve you more ads, right? They don't want you to leave the site, so that's why they're not putting any type of links that are inside of any post that you put on either LinkedIn or Facebook. They're pushing those down, right? You have to put that link in your first comment, which is incredibly frustrating when you're trying to share a blog article. And that stuff I can go into later, but I think it's better to give you a metaphor for understanding the social media algorithms. And I always see confused looks, but I promise I hope it gets there. So when you post anything, whether it's on your own network and potentially on the pages of the companies that you work for, it's exposed to less than 10% of your audience. So if you have 1,000 followers, only 100 people may end up seeing your post. And that's contingent on the historical background of your posts. So if you are posting great stuff and every time you're getting 50 plus likes, comments, and shares, then it's more than likely you'll be closer to 10. If every time you post and it's just mom that likes your stuff, hey mom, great, it means that you're probably getting close to 1 to 2% of your entire audience actually seeing your stuff, which sucks, but that's the reality. So think of like a really eager to please buffet restaurant owner that wants to make sure everything that people enjoy is always out in front of them. So when people start taking more of whatever those things are, the orangey things, then more of them are supplied to the audience or the buffet. And so the concept is you need to have a lot of likes very early or a lot of engagement very early, which makes your post stick around longer. But you also need to make sure that you're getting more likes, comments, and a diversified range of engagement throughout. So I think one of the more interesting things that's happening, there was an uproar, it was only a week ago, where people were freaking out because the Facebook groups that they've created have gone down by either 10, 20, sometimes 40, 50%. The idea is Facebook basically just tweaked one minor thing. The idea was that if you had invited somebody and they had not confirmed that they had joined that group, they were no longer a member of that group. They were no longer counted as a member. Really simple fix, but people lost their shit. Like they were like, oh, like there's something happening, and there is. The idea is that pages are no longer being valued, and I'm going to show a couple of examples in a minute. But groups are. And you can see this inside of your own notifications on Facebook. Most of the notifications I get are for groups because, I don't know, nobody's dropping stuff on my page anymore. I don't know. And most of the things that are happening in terms of your newsfeed are not pages. There's a number of reasons for that. One is because the stuff that you post on your page has gotten too ad-centric, too rah-rah, go us, not enough value being added. Groups tend to add more value because nobody cares about your stupid product, bro. Give us something that everybody can use. And Facebook realized that a long time ago. LinkedIn's trying to figure it out, but I think they're much further behind. So I wanted to show a couple of different examples on the next slide. One of my favorite videos that really spells that out is the video that's linked right here. Veritasium basically exposed that even if you're paying for likes genuinely using Facebook, they're not real. Back in 2018, Facebook announced that they deleted 1.3 billion accounts. There was an article that just came out last week that said half of all Facebook accounts could be fake. Just a show of hands, how many people here have created more than one Facebook account in their lifetime? Oh, come on. How many people stalk their ex? Come on. But no, I mean, the point is, I think that number is falsely inflated. I think it could be as much as half of these accounts are potentially fake. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of figure out, how do I get above that? And I wanted to show a couple of really short examples of why posting on your company's page, not a group, your company's page isn't working anymore. Right? So this is Crunchbase. Crunchbase has been around for quite some time. I technically consider them a competitor of Valuer. They basically show startup profiles. And hold on. They basically show something in the sense of basically, have you been funded? What does your company do? People can connect on there. Think about it for like LinkedIn, but for like kind of the startup scene. So they have 25,789 people that like their page. Fantastic. But if we start scrolling through their content, there's a post that went out 16 hours ago, 0 likes. There's a post that went out just after that, 0 likes. 19 hours ago, 0 likes, 0 likes. Hey, there's 1 like. Thanks, Mom. You know, even the people that wrote these things aren't liking them. Like, why share it? It doesn't make any sense. It just boggles the mind. But there's a reason for this, and this is also why Facebook is trying to draw back the reach of these pages, is probably the content isn't valuable anymore. It's like, hey, we had our ice cream social on Friday. Like, who cares? Like, this isn't valuable to me. And I think you have to see through that to understand you should start looking into creating communities, your own groups, in your own niches. Find who your ideal customers are and build a group that surrounds them. For us, Valuer, it's innovation, right? Large companies that can benefit from innovation. For you, maybe it's, I don't know, fancy pots and pans that everybody wants to cook with. I have no idea what your businesses are. But there's a million different ways to be able to drive something in the way of value using groups, because the reach is gone from Facebook and it's significantly lessened from LinkedIn. And I included a few other examples here, but in the essence of time, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense to kind of carry that stuff in. But I think there's a lot of really cool things that you can do as a thought leader growing into a group, and every once in a while peppering in the stuff that is the most valuable. Give away your best stuff. Give away stuff that's curated. And I'm going to show some examples of how to curate content for these groups. For building kind of the reach for groups, I do think the tagging and hashtags and commenting is cool, but comment on other groups. Go to where the communities have already been built and start saying, hey, you know, like if you really like this group, you should come join my group. Like, my club's way better. Most of the time you'll get flagged, some of the time you won't. And there's a million different places where you can do that. You can do that on Reddit, you can do that on Quora, but you can also do that on Facebook groups, you can do that on LinkedIn groups. I've seen a lot of different places where that's done. Curating content to me is kind of the new crazy, sexy growth hacking thing that will last for about 9 months until somebody goes, well, you're basically using somebody else's stuff. And it's like, well, kind of, but no. So I wanted to show a real quick growth hack in terms of getting a bunch of content that you can immediately use for your own group or your own page, or potentially use the skyscraper technique and test it out. I hope everybody's heard of Reddit, right? It's a pretty common website, Reddit. So Reddit allows you to basically search a single topic. So let's say for my company, I'm looking up startups. And I want to see all the posts from just the last month. So this is using a concept of social proof that I'll explain very briefly later. But the idea is basically what types of posts have in the past month got the highest amount of engagement. So proving via another example, it worked over here on Reddit, it will definitely work over here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever. So if it's basically a company starter pack, great, okay, I'll make my own version of that, no problem. If it's a meme, fantastic, I'll share it as well. I'm not making any money off of it, so we're golden. Or if it's a really cool article that seems really relevant to your community, great, copy, paste. That's it. It's that simple. And you can schedule all this stuff out. Buffer, Hootsuite, Postcron, pick your poison. But the idea is this maybe takes a few hours to take the best, most highly ranked content that is currently circulating most of the internet and have it as your own. You are then kind of this aggregator of the best stuff. And people are like, hey, where do you find it? I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just smart. It's like, no, it's on Reddit. Like anybody can do this. But people are lazy, so they don't. And I think the other side of this, which I don't share a ton of, but it's something that I'm experimenting with as well. We've all seen on LinkedIn, there's World Economic Forum, there's Cheddar, there's a bunch of these really short, kind of catchy, BuzzFeed-looking clips that describe a business model or innovation or something like that. Subscribe to their YouTube channels and pick out whichever ones work for you. Use a YouTube extractor to download the clip, upload it to your network, and basically say, hey, there you go, found it. And people are like, oh yeah, engaged, I like that. Let me show you an example of somebody that does that. So I'm really into this stuff. I don't know if it makes me a weirdo. If I find the profile, I thought I had it in here. Oh, well, it's in there somewhere. That's okay. In the essence of saving time, I'll have to move on. But if you can't figure out your industry, there are some really, really cool tools that allow you to figure out what to search for. So one of my favorites is Answer the Public. And this is great for generating content as well. You have this really angry dude. He's like, come on, hurry up, Taylor. And I'm like, I know. So yeah, basically I search for a keyword and then it gives me all the related phrases. It also gives me questions in those industries or that keyword. It basically builds out an entire web of keywords underneath it. So the idea is if you're ever running out of potential content or you're ever running out of ideas to ask your audience or you're looking for different things to search for to curate your boom. Answer the Public is a really great tool and I think it's a fantastic use of time rather than sitting there and trying to figure it out on your own. You don't have to do that. Somebody else did it for you. It's a tool. Save yourself the one-to-one time. This is 1 to 1,000. Really simple. Don't have much time to stay on that, and I got to move past that. For influencers, there's so many different tools to find great influencers. Don't reach out to people that have millions of influencers. They're not going to respond. It's the small to medium guys and gals that I think there's so much more value there, especially if they're hyper-targeted and their audience is your audience. I wish I had more time to go into that. I won't. This was one of my favorite things whenever I do write posts that list people or list something. We wrote this post about the 25 most eccentric entrepreneurs, or maybe it was 26, and we tagged basically Richard Branson, Bill Gates. Shocker, those guys didn't get back. But this guy, Dr. Nakamatsu, he invented the floppy disk. And it's like, okay, cool. We reached out to him, said, hey, we mentioned you. And he goes, how do you do? I wish to talk with you. Where are you in October? I'm coming to the U.S. in October. Fantastic. Like, I remember the floppy disk. I used to use those, and trying to explain that to like interns. Like, I was born in 94. I'm like, fuck you. This isn't for you. This is exciting for me, So I think it's so cool that you actually get a chance to talk with these like real amazing movers and shakers for no other reason than you just reached out. That was it. And sometimes they will reach back, and it's this really cool thing that they are sometimes just good people that are willing to expose you to their audience. Another guy down at the bottom, Eric Sanchez, fantastic guy I grew up with. He basically just hustles and hassles politicians and like D-list celebrities until they're like, fine, man, what do you want to say? It's amazing, and it works. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. One other thing that I do want to show because it drives the insanity home is basically cracking the code of what works and what doesn't work. This is a post that I did on LinkedIn that has, to the dates, the highest number of likes and engagement that I got for anything I've ever posted in the history of my posting stuff. So this is 680 likes and it's 44,631 views. It's fucking me biking to work, right? It has nothing to do with anything. It's just me going, That's it. It's mind-blowing. You have no idea how many hours I've spent sculpting articles trying to get people to look and trying to get value in. I don't get it. Sometimes things happen and there's no explanation, and sometimes there isn't a learning, a teachable moment there. It's just, well, that's nice. Let's see if we can do that again. That's all you can take out of these things, and I hope that works for you as well sometimes. I don't have an explanation. But I do know why it continued to work out. And it's because of the concept of social proof that I was talking about before. Let's say that you're walking down kind of the central street of some other city on a Saturday afternoon. You're looking for a nice place to either grab a drink or grab something in the way of food. You see this restaurant on your left side and the restaurant that's completely empty on your right side. Which one do you think most of us would eat at? It's not the empty one. The reason for that is you're like, yeah, nobody goes there. Let's go to the one where people are at. Doesn't mean the food's any better over here. Doesn't mean that the service is nice. Doesn't mean anything. It's just we are these habitual animals that, for whatever reason, want to like things that other people like. And it is no other proof than the validation of somebody else liking something that makes you go, oh, okay. Nobody wants to be the first one to like something on LinkedIn because, like, well, I mean, nobody else is into it. I don't want to be the only guy to be like, hey, you're cool. And that happens, right? So it's really incredible. There's a lot of different Slack groups that are popping up that you can join up and basically say, hey, I'm posting something this morning. Guys, hook it up. You get 50 likes all at once. And then when they post something the next morning, it's your turn to like their stuff. That works really well. And it's very sneaky and kind of against the rules. But, you know, do what you will with that information, I guess. All right, I'm going to try to race through the last few slides here. I really want to like do this for another hour. I just don't have the time. But conversion rate optimization is one of my favorite parts of, I don't know why I put that GIF in. I totally forgot the rationale behind that. But yeah, I do genuinely believe that conversion rate optimization is one of the most interesting things that you can do for your business in terms of taking what is or what exists in terms of your website or your landing pages and turn up the conversions tenfold. And it's simple stuff like video, right? Adding a video to landing pages increases conversions by 86%. That is a true statistic, and it blows my mind. It's just one of those things. Little, small elements make a major difference. There's a ton of tools listed here. If you don't have anything that grabs somebody, if there's no way to grab their information, use push notifications. Push proof's cheap. It allows you to hit that allow or block button. After that, you can send people notifications until they have to figure out how to go in notifications and remove it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can hammer people, but there's also a lot of different ways that you can give them exactly what they want. So consider those to be excellent tools. Exit pop-ups, I think, actually are valuable. One of the last things that I do want to show is the difference between long landing pages and short landing pages. Just from common sense, I would assume that the shorter thing would work. That's not the case. I've tested it myself. When you have this mile-long landing page, some people actually look at this stuff. It's crazy. Give them opportunities to convert halfway between, 2/3 the way down the page. Give them multiple opportunities to sync their email in, to allow something in the way of notifications, to grab a free guide. But these long landing pages actually do a great job. It's unbelievable. And it seems really over the top and salesy, but it works. One of the last things, AMP pages, super helpful. It's basically accelerated mobile pages. They've taken off. It's Google's framework. They're basically trying to get people to have sites that work on mobile that are faster. So Google says, great, if they have AMP pages, we'll serve up more of the mobile traffic their way, and we're going to shoot them right up to the very top of search engine results pages. Highly recommend it. Look it up. It's really easy to implement if you have a WordPress site. If not, it can get a lot more sticky. Just the last thing before I kind of bounce out of this. I wish there was more time. Some of the referrals that I've seen on onboarding is outstanding, right? This is where entire empires are started. Airbnb and Uber basically offered a referral to refer a friend, and all of a sudden you have two people in the network at the same time. 77% of customers are more likely to buy a new product when learning about it from friends or family. So put a referral network into your system during the onboarding. It is so easy. And there's so many examples to just Google it. I mean, it's so straightforward. In the essence of time, I think I have to kind of come to a close. There's still like another 15, 20 slides, but I don't know. I'll do this again real quick. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to give all this stuff. Can I take one question before? Yes?
Have you tested out referrals in terms of which side you give, or if you give the person that you already have or the other person something? So like share this with a friend and give your friend something versus share this with a friend and then you get something?
Yeah, so my experience with that was receiving as well as giving. Obviously, we're kind of those types of creatures that's like, what do I get out of the deal for hooking you up? It's always better to give something in the way of incentive. And if you've ever worked with affiliate networks, this is basically how the market works. In any type of dropship model, you get something out of giving something. So absolutely 100%. Yeah, I guess that's it for me, guys. I wish I had more time, but we'll be doing one of these real soon. You'll get the notes, and hopefully that's that. But thank you for having me, and thank you for coming and taking time out of your day.